All right, so let's get to some more of your asks here. I think these are the last few that I have for this week, as of right now. Do you think the symbolism and the patterns and all the setup was just left as an artifact after they scrapped what was going to be Beth's original storyline for season 5, and they didn't bother to change anything because who cares if she's dead, right? Gimple kept saying he'd been planning her story since season 4, and they had different iterations of the story, and things kept changing. So maybe it was just a lot of rewrites for the summer of 2014. No, I don't think that at all. So you have some points here, but you kind of have to differentiate between, and I get that it sounds a little bit like hair splitting, but truly there's, it's both. So on the one hand, things do change. The details change. Okay, so I want you guys to always be thinking of it like this. I believe that the underlying story, the actual events that are going to happen, like from a bird's eye view, from a 1,000-foot view, have always been the same and they have never changed. But the way in which they play out, how long it takes, the details of the story, things like that, those do change. And it's because, you know, week to week or month to month, year to year, filming, writing scripts, I mean, things change. There's the availability of actors. There's outside conditions like the pandemic. There's all kinds of things they have to deal with. So, of course, they have to roll with the punches and things have to change. And I think sometimes, it is still my personal opinion, I don't have proof of this, that Rosita, I think, was supposed to go further in the story. I think that they did have some symbolism set up for her that they did not fulfill. And I think if it's a big part of the story, they will simply give it to a different character. But I think that Christian Serratos just didn't want to keep going with TWD. I mean, originally, you know, we know that it got lengthened out. And by season 11, she just decided she wanted to work on other things. And they always respect that from the actors and let them. I mean, TWD is known for letting actors out of their contracts even early. You know, they just have to first shore things up and kind of give them a smooth out. And so it's not necessarily immediately, but they will let them out early because they respect the actors and they don't want them working there if they don't want to be working there. So we know that's true from several actors who have exited the show. And Christian Serratos hasn't said that, but I think that she was supposed to go further and she just made the decision that she didn't want to be in it anymore after the flagship show. And just the fact that they killed her off, that's why I think that. Because any of the other actors who are still, you know, I guess at Alexandria, that's what we know, people like Eugene and Aaron and Connie, you know, they could theoretically come back at some point because they're still there. Them killing her off means she will not be back, right? Obviously. And I think that was just Christian saying she was done being on The Walking Dead. And that's her decision, and, you know, wish her all the best and everything. Anyway, but I think, again, back to your question, I think that the big events, the way that they've planned them, the arcs, even the symbolism, have always been the same, but it's the details that will change. So because of that, I think that that's true, that the way in which the story played out can change. And the perfect example is Melissa deciding not to do the first season of Daryl Dixon. I think everything that we're going to see in season 2 was supposed to come in season 1, but because Melissa couldn't do it, they pushed it back a season. Okay, because her being there, because of Consumed and the way that they set things up in season 5 is a really big part of Beth returning. And so they had to wait for her. But that just goes to show that the story didn't play out the way it was originally planned, and that was okay. They rolled with the punches, they figured it out, and it will play out, it's just taking a little bit longer. So things do change, but I don't believe the big events that are going to happen change. So, it's funny that you say Gimple had been planning her story since season 4. I would argue he may have been planning it since season 2. And he may not have known if he was going to be able to do it because he was only a junior writer then. He was not in charge. But there are people who have found plenty of hints at a Beth and Daryl romance in season 3. And I, you know, originally I wasn't sure I agreed with them. But the more I watched it over the years, the more sure I was like, yeah, you know what, they're right. Maybe they were subtle enough that if they had gone a different way, like let's say Gimple didn't become the showrunner and they had, you know, gone a completely different way with Daryl's love interest, then it wouldn't have been a big deal. It would have just been something random that happened back in season 3. But given everything that's happened, I do think it was planned before that. So anyway, to answer your story, I mean your question, I'm sorry. I don't think anything is ever left as what did you say it as an artifact in the show. We know that Gimple very often goes back to earlier seasons and mines them for symbolic things to use later on. but I don't think they would ever completely scrap a storyline. Let's put it this way. They wouldn't ever completely scrap a storyline unless the actor did not want to do it anymore. I think that's kind of where I always land with this, because we know that they had more planned for both Dale and Sophia, but both of those actors asked to leave the show, so they changed the storyline. And again, it's because they respect the actors and they're not going to force them to keep working if they don't want to work. Same with Jesus, the guy that played Jesus. He didn't like that he wasn't as central a role as he had hoped to be, and he started asking to be let out of his contract. And Angela Kang did let him out of his contract, but she made him wait like half a season because they wanted to give him a good exit as the character Jesus, because he is a big character in the comic book. But they would not have had him die when he did, except that the actor wanted to move on to other projects. You see what I mean? We know for a fact that Emily did not want to move on to other projects. The way that she cried, the way that she was sad to leave. And yes, I do believe that that was all kind of an act. But my point is, it doesn't make sense that they would write her out after all the setup, after everything they had planned, and then all the weirdness. I mean, the other characters who have died and left the show, we did not have this weirdness around them dying and leaving, okay? And so, no, I don't think that that is the case at all. I think it's always been the plan, and while the way that it plays out and the details have changed, the overall plan has not. So, like I said, I know that that's... You have to kind of differentiate between what the details are and what the overall plan is, and then you have to look at a lot of other variables that can change things, like if actors want to leave or if there are outside circumstances. So it does get to be a lot to keep track of, and it is a little confusing sometimes. But just the fact that we have so much evidence and even proof about when things were planned. We have the fact that we've had other character fake-outs, death fake-outs, that have followed the same templates as Beth, like, Glenn in season 3. Around him, it was not only the same template, he had the same dialogue as Beth, and he survived. So to me, that is as good as proof that she will too. Hers is just a much longer game. If we didn't have that, there's a lot of things I could say that about. If we didn't have that, then it would be a lot harder to believe. But that, back in season 6A, was all the confirmation I needed that she would be back eventually, because we had that, all of the ties and synchronicities with her storyline around Glenn when Maggie thought he died and they were separated, but then he sort of was resurrected, symbolically, came back to life and reunited with Maggie. When Glenn actually died at the end of the season, none of the synchronicities were there. So that should tell you that those things that were around Beth and around Glenn when he fake died are the things that they put around characters who seem to die in the eyes of Team Family, but aren't really dead and they're going to come back at some point. You see what I mean? So I understand why people think this, and I understand that there are certain things that it's hard to wrap your head around or that might seem a little bit disheartening, but for me, I'm way past the point where I think that we're wrong at all. So I hope that helps. One thing that I had piled in the evidence/symbolism mountain that always caught my eye is after 508, when Team Delusional was just starting and gaining speed, someone noticed when Beth goes to hug Noah, you see a crucifix bracelet on her wrist that dangles, and you get a nice good look at the big silver crucifix. We know Gimple loves symbolism, and especially religious ones. It's funny because I don't ever remember seeing Beth wear that bracelet before, and then right after she dies, it just appears and is super noticeable. Or right before she dies, I think I said after. Jesus died and was left in a tomb car. You know the rest. Totally. This is a big thing. And I think exactly what you put here, that he had her wearing that to show that she was going to be a Christ-like sacrifice. Like, I think that was the whole reason for the crucifix. And I mean, for that, because she's going to be resurrected. Like, that's the whole thing. And then after that, we even had Father Gabriel in 5:16 talking about how they sacrificed one of their own, and it's unclear who he meant. He mentioned Bob, I think, but there was no way in which Team Family sacrificed Bob. I mean, he died, but that was because of the termites. That had nothing to do with anything the Rick's group did. They would have tried to save him. So it didn't make any sense, but this is why we sometimes talk about Beth as being a sacrifice, and we're not sure exactly how she was a sacrifice. I mean, sacrifice usually means somebody sending them to their death on purpose. And obviously that didn't happen. But we feel like it has something to do with the missing 17 days, if I can speak, and about things that we don't understand about Grady, and maybe things we don't understand about Terminus and all of the mysteries around her death. So, 100%, I am with you on that. And I do think that is why she was wearing the crucifix, to show that she is a Christic figure, and that, the reason to show that is that she's going to be back at some point, and to show that this is her, this scene is her crucifixion, as it were. And then, going back to the idea of the Coda, we're going to skip so that they can focus on the main narrative. And then when she shows up again, that will be her symbolic resurrection. So, yeah, but thanks for pointing that out. All right. Hi. Am I the only one who really likes Beth's death scene? I do think she survived. But if she was really dead, I think it's the best death in the show. I get the tiny scissors hate. I'm sure that's not supposed to be funny, but it's just one of those phrases that would only make sense to TWD fans and maybe only to TDers. If you said tiny scissors hate to anyone else, they would know what you were talking about. Anyway, I get the tiny scissors hate, but Beth didn't die on her knees as a victim or stupidly bitten by a walker. She died looking super badass, standing in front of Dawn. She knew she was going to get hurt or killed, but she knew that it would also get Dawn killed, and Noah and the Grady people would be free. She sacrificed herself for what she believed in. That was so beautiful, even the way she shot and fall in slow motion, Daryl carrying her with the majestic music playing. It was perfect, and the most beautiful way to go, in my opinion. But I agree that it was definitely not her time, and can't wait for her to come back. Yeah, I mean, 100%. I don't know. I don't always watch the actual death scene all that much, except, I've watched it plenty of times to look for clues. And I know that there have been times that I've posted pictures of when she actually is shot, like screenshots I've taken that actually have the gore coming out of her head. And there's people that don't like that it really triggers them. And they're like, why are you posting that? And I'm just like, oh, sorry, I'm just trying to show, usually I'm trying to show where the gunshot entry wound is on her forehead, and that's why I post that. But, yeah, I mean, to your point, it just makes me think, honestly, it just makes me think a lot about Daryl, because, I've been learning a lot about the energetics lately of masculine and feminine energy. And clearly, Daryl is got a lot of masculine energy. And I mean, that sounds like, well, duh. But I probably don't mean it in the way that you're thinking that I mean it. I mean, obviously, he's a very masculine man. But it's not really about the way he looks. And it's not about the way he talks or what he says. It's a little bit about, it's definitely a little bit about what he does and how he reacts to things. But, so just to share something here, I was thinking about, because the masculine energy is always action and it's always protectiveness, right? And those two things definitely describe Daryl. So like I said, but it's not necessarily about what he says or how he looks, but I was thinking about back in season 2, when the whole Shane thing went down and Rick ends up killing Shane. There's a scene where Glenn and Daryl went out trying to find them and trying to track them, but Shane had given Daryl bad information, so he went back to the beginning, started over, and they eventually found Randall's body. And once they found that, they knew something was really, really off, and they went back to Herschel's farmhouse and told everyone what was going on. And Lori got really freaked out, and she goes up to Daryl and she touches his arm and she says, I don't know what's going on. I'm paraphrasing here. I don't know what's going on, but I'm really scared, and I want you to go find Rick and bring him back. Now, Daryl, of course, just says, okay, and he goes to do it. But the thing that's interesting about that is that Daryl doesn't really like Lori, right? I mean, and understandably, she's pretty nasty to him most of the time. And he, she's not someone he would really do a favor for or really like. And he is kind of mean to her earlier on in the series when she wants him to go into town and get Herschel, when Beth becomes catatonic and everything. But in this moment, he immediately does what she says. I think he says something like, you bet, I'm going to go get him. And then he just goes and does it. And the thought that I was having is that is very, very masculine energy to be in, because it didn't matter who she was. It didn't matter if he hates her. It's that he's the protector. He's the person who's action-oriented. She needed something from him, and he was going to help her with that. And that's like Daryl's whole character. He is the protector. He is the person who takes action to protect the people that he's with, even if like they're being total douchebags to him, he'll still do it because they're with him. You know what I mean? And that's why people are so drawn to Daryl as a character, and especially why women are drawn to him. We think it's just because, yeah, Norman's very nice to look at, and you know, he used to wear the sleeveless shirts, and of course that's part of it. Of course, the attraction, the physical attraction, is definitely part of it. But really, it's the character's very masculine energy, and it draws people in subconsciously. Okay, so anyway, that's just me geeking out about energetics. But back to what you said about Beth. I mean, it just makes me think that she was trained by Daryl, and she was doing what he would have done in that situation. You know, Noah was her friend, and he helped her. He even took a beating for her, and that made her very loyal to him. And even more than that, she had already sacrificed herself in a way, like before the hallway, to get Noah out. You know, she made sure that he got away, but she got taken back in so that he could get away, and she smiled. I mean, that was a point of pride for her, that she helped him get away. And Dawn was trying to take all of that from her. So she was almost like, you know, standing up for her own pride and her own accomplishments, you know. But of course it was also to protect Noah and, like you said, the other people there who she knows are being oppressed. So she was just acting very much like Daryl would have acted, and in a way that would have made him proud. And I'm sure it did, you know. It was just eclipsed by the tragedy of losing her. So, yeah, I mean, 100% I'm with you with there. I mean, she stood up to Dawn. She was not backing down. And yeah, that was really, really heroic, and especially the fact that she got shot. The other thing is that I think, watched the ending where he carries her out a lot more, because I really love the music there, and I really love the wide shots, and, you know, how epic it is, and, you know, you mentioned that as well. But keep in mind, even people who do not ship Beth and Daryl in particular, I'm not talking about like the haters or the shippers who want him with someone else other than them. People who just like didn't have any particular opinion about it, or were happy Daryl was getting a love interest, but they didn't care who it was. You know, people who are not TDers, who do not think she's coming back, who are not super big Beth fans. Most of them, like 99% of the fandom, they see that scene in Coda where he carries her out of the hospital as the most iconic scene of the entire series. Like, they've done polls on this, guys. And, you know, a lot of it is because they probably don't think she's coming back, you know. But they just, it's because it's Daryl. It's because they feel the tragedy of it. It's because of the epic music. It's because everybody in Team Family, all of them, are crying, like every single one of them. In fact, there were stories at the time, one that Andy told, where he kept, you know, he had his mark he was supposed to go stand on for that scene, especially for the wide shot. You know, the camera's really far back, so they all just have to stand there and wait for them to get shot. And there was a particular, you know, place Andy was supposed to stand. They all have their marks to go stand on. And Andy kept turning around. He kept turning away, and to the point where they were, the director and the camera guys behind the scenes were kind of getting mad at him and going, "What are you doing? Stop turning around." And it was because he kept crying. So I think it sounds to me like we were actually supposed to see Rick's face in that scene, but he wasn't supposed to be crying. Like, Rick was, you know, was very hardened, and he did cry in the hallway when she first got shot, but when he gets out there, he's supposed to be completely like stone-faced, and he couldn't stop crying because they were doing the scene, so they just didn't show Rick's face. Like, that didn't end up being in the episode, right? Because we do see his face when he comes out of the hospital and he shakes his head to show that, you know, Beth didn't make it, but we don't see his face after that. And like I said, I think we were supposed to, but everybody is crying. And then Denai said that, you know, she's crying. We see her crying in the show. But she said, oh, yeah, no need to act that day. Those were all real tears. Like, we were all sobbing, you know. And so it's just everybody felt the emotion of that. And that includes the audience. So, you know, I think people do feel what you're saying here, that she went out heroically, but it was that just made it all the more tragic, like you said. So yeah, I really, really love that, what you said. 100%, I'm with you. And anyway, I kind of ramble on and on, but that's just what it made me think of. Alrighty. That is all I have for right now, but I will be back next week with more. And hopefully we will soon get some more information on when we can expect Daryl Dixon Season 2. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and I will be back soon. Bye!